Okay, boys and girls, so I am going to go over the organisms interactions slideshow with you today. This is our week 3 page before spring break. This is going to change. But just to show you how to get into home learning again, you'll click on this link. And this is if you haven't done week 1, 2, or three's work. Week 4 is going to be some review stuff, so that'll be a little bit different. So what I'm going to do is click into PS10 Organisms Interactions so I can get into the slideshow. You have already done this, hopefully. It required you to make a copy. And then once your copy was here, you could go ahead and start working through. So what this slideshow was all about was teaching you about competition, predation, mutualism, and then when we got down here, we dug in a little bit deeper to those different types of relationships. So the learning goal was, I can interpret the cause and effect relationships between resource availability and interactions among organisms in multiple ecosystems. So basically, food, water, shelter is resource availability, and how the interaction among organisms is affected by that resource availability. So think about if there was limited food, obviously there's going to be some competition, right? Let me go back to these competitive type relationships. Sometimes you'll have predators in those food chains, which you guys have been learning about, food chains that will basically seek out other animals for food and so on. So I asked you to watch this video on competition. Then I asked you to watch the video on predation. This is a lot of people's favorite because it's always so exciting and lots of action there. And then mutualism. And then what you were supposed to do, I got a lot of questions about these slides here. And that's really my fault because I didn't really explain in detail what I was looking for with categorize and explanation. So basically, I'm looking for you to tell me, is this a predatory relationship, a competitive relationship, or a mutualistic relationship? So you're reading the scenario, and then you're going to tell me which relationship you want, you think it is, and then you're going to explain to me why you think it's that relationship. So I'm going to read through these with you, and I'm going to tell you what they are. Again, you're supposed to be watching this if you are done with the slideshow. If you are not done with the slideshow, I'm going to ask you to turn this off and to go back and to work on the slideshow and then come back and use this to check your answers. Okay, that's what these videos are for, is to check your answers after. And that's just on an honor system. If you remember in class, there really isn't quote unquote cheating because you are just checking against yourself. So this is really just to inform you how well you did and where you are back here on the standard. If we were looking at this as a 1, 2, 3, 4 score, 2 being that you still need help and 3 being that you could do it independently, this video is to help you kind of see how well you did. If you needed to go back and get a little more practice, maybe you're at a level 2, or maybe you got them all correct and you're good. Also, you can pause this screen cast at any time and get up and do whatever you need to do and come back to it, or if it gets overwhelming and you just need to take a break, you can pause it at any time and just come back to it, like any YouTube video, of course. All right, so let me put it in present mode. Maybe that's easier. So it says the Canadian lynx and the snowshoe hare both live in the northern forests of Canada and Alaska. The population of snowshoe hairs rises and falls based on resource availability. So food, water, shelter. When the population of the snowshoe hares falls, the Canadian lynx suffers from lack of food resources. So basically what this is saying to you is that whenever the snowshoe hare doesn't have the resources it needs, say food, then this population is going to decrease. And so as a result of the population of this hare decreasing, then the Canadian lynx also suffers from a lack of food resources. So what could we assume is the food resource for the Canadian lynx? If you said that the food resource is the snowshoe hare, then yes, you made the correct assumption. That is absolutely correct. So what does this tell you about the relationship between these two organisms? So if this is eating this, is that going to be a competitive relationship? Are they both competing for the same food, water, or shelter? No, right? The hare eats something completely different. The lynx eats the hare. So it's not a mutualistic relationship either, because in a mutualistic relationship, they both benefit. And I would say if I'm getting eaten by this guy over here, that is not very beneficial. That is not helping me, right? That's what that word beneficial means. It helps me. It's good for me. So that leaves us with a predatory relationship. So interaction 1 is a predatory relationship. And we basically already explained, right? Because the hare is the food source for the lynx. So it's a predatory relationship. All right. Interaction number 2. Lichens are formed by algae and fungi living together. Algae can photosynthesize and make food, which is shared by the fungus. The fungus, in turn, shelters the algae from a harsh climate. So I'm going to tell you right now that this in turn phrase gives us a really good hint about what type of relationship this is. So again, lichens are formed by algae and fungi living together, and the algae can photosynthesize and make food, which is shared by the fungus. So the algae is providing food for the fungus, and in turn, the fungus shelters the algae. So, are they both competing for the same thing? No, right? Because the algae can make its own food. And then the fungi doesn't have to compete because the algae just keeps making this food and it can feed off of that. It can share that food with the fungus or the fungi. They're not competing for shelter because the algae is actually, the fungus is providing shelter for the algae, right? And then one or the other is not eating the other, so it's not competition, it's not predation, so it's not competitive, it's not predatory, so that means it's mutualistic. Mutualistic meaning it benefits both mutually. If you don't know what that word mutually means, it means basically that it's good for both parties. You doing this assignment and learning while you're stuck in quarantine is mutually beneficial for me and for you, because as your teacher, you're getting exposure to the content, and as a student, you're learning. So it's mutually beneficial to both of us. So this is a mutualistic relationship. And again, we explained that because basically they're helping each other, right? The algae is providing food and the fungus is providing shelter. So they really rely on each other. Okay. Interaction number 3. In a dense forest, many seedlings which germinated in the spring may not survive the winter because they do not receive enough sunlight. The tallest trees receive the most sunlight, and they often block the sun from reaching the seedlings on the floor. Now, we'll see this a lot in our forests up in the Uintas, right? In a very dense forest, so these seedlings, they'll be germinated in the spring, and we're in the spring right now, right? So the seedlings down here are going to be germinated. But then you're going to have these tallest trees up here that are taking all the sunlight. And what do these need to be able to grow up like these? They need sunlight, right? So they are competing. They are both competing for a resource. And what is that resource? It's the sunlight, right? So this is a competitive relationship. Again, very simply, because the seedling and the tree are competing for the sunlight. Of course, the tree is winning, right? Because it's going to block the sun from getting to this little seedling here. All right. If I remember, one of these was pretty tricky. Might be this one, we'll see. All right, leafcutter ants' larvae eat only one kind of fungi. Okay, so the larvae of the leafcutter ant eats only one kind of fungi. So mushroom, think, a fungus. That's not the only fungi, but the ant colony's activities revolve around cultivating or taking care of the fungi. So everything that the ant colony does revolves around taking care of the fungi. They provide it with digestive leaf material, so they provide the fungi with the digestive leaf material, and can sense if a leaf species is harmful to the fungi, and it keeps it free from pests. So the ant colony basically takes care of the fungi, provides it with digested leaf material, and it can also tell if a leaf species is going to be harmful to it, so it keeps pests off of it. The fungi cannot survive without the constant care of the ants. Okay, so what do you think that is? The fungi cannot survive without the constant care of the ants. I think it's right there in that sentence, right? So let me ask you, are the ants basically predators to the fungi? No, right? They're helping. They're helping for sure. Is it a competitive relationship? Are they competing for anything? I didn't see anywhere in this description where they're competing for anything in particular. It sounds to me like basically the ants, their larvae has to eat the fungi, right? So it's really beneficial, really helpful for them to keep the fungi alive. And so when they do that, basically the fungi can't survive without the constant care of the ants. The only reason it's able to exist, this particular fungi, is because of the ants. So it sounds to me like it's mutualistic, right? It helps both the fungi and the leafcutter ants. They couldn't survive because it only eats that one kind, right? And then the fungi can't survive without the constant care of the ants. So that's mutualistic. Again, we just explained why. Okay. Flowers need bees to pollinate them so their seeds can be fertilized. Bees need pollen to produce honey for their hive. I feel like that one is just straightforward, right? Flowers need the bees to pollinate them, and then the bees need the pollen from the flowers to produce honey. So again, mutualistic. They're both benefiting. Okay. A gardener releases ladybugs to help control the aphid population in his garden. ladybug larvae will eat their weight in aphids each day. So there's an organism in this scenario that a lot of students don't recognize right away. Can you tell me? There's actually 3 organisms in this scenario. Even though we have a picture here of the ladybug and the aphids, there's one more organism in there. If you said the gardener, you are correct, right? So the gardener is releasing the ladybugs to help control the aphid population in the garden. And the ladybug larvae will eat their weight in aphids each day. So this was the one that we realized last year was kind of tricky, because I think there's a couple of different relationships happening here. So if the ladybug's eating the aphids, that is what? Predatory, right? So they're just going right in there and munching away on them and getting rid of them. So that's definitely not beneficial for the aphid. And this scenario isn't really that they're competing for anything, right? Because the aphids really don't even have a chance to compete. They're just getting eaten up by these pretty little ladybugs. But the gardener, the relationship between the gardener and the ladybug is mutualistic. So if we're considering the gardener an organism as well, right, and an interaction in this scenario, then that relationship between the gardener and the ladybug is mutually beneficial. So it's mutualistic. But if we're talking about the ladybug larvae and the aphids, then that's predatory. So you could have put both or one. Maybe you questioned that. You realize if you did, good catch. It's really amazing if you were able to catch that. All right. Interaction 7. Both vultures and hyenas eat dead animals. A hyena will chase away the vultures from a dead zebra, keeping the carcass for themselves. So they are both trying to get the carcass, right? Even though the hyena is going to chase away, right, the vulture, they are both what? They're competing, right? It's not benefiting both of them. They're not going, hey, Mr. Vulture, hey, Mr. Hyena, you want to share this carcass. It's actually coming and chasing this one away. So it's competing for that food source. So that's competition. And that's it. That's the end of that. So hopefully this will help you check your answers. Hopefully this cleared it up a little bit for you. I hope you enjoyed those videos. Those videos on this slideshow back here, probably some of my favorite videos. The one about the aphids is really, really interesting. Yeah, so I hope you guys are doing well, and I hope that this helps you check your answers for that slideshow. All right, bye boys and girls.